The room went silent the moment my name was called. More than 200 guests turned their heads toward me at the same time. Crystal glasses paused halfway to lips. Conversation stopped. Even the band in the corner slowed their music. I stood near the back of the wedding hall, completely unprepared for what was about to happen. My future mother-in-law was standing on the stage holding a microphone, and the smile on her face felt wrong. Not warm, not welcoming, sharp. The kind of smile someone wears when they already know how a moment will end. She announced that before the couple's first dance, the family wanted to share a few words about the people joining their lives together. Everyone clapped politely. Then she said my name again. My fiancée looked surprised beside the stage, clearly unaware of whatever plan her mother had prepared. I felt my stomach tighten as guests began encouraging me to come forward. At first it seemed like a normal wedding tradition. A small speech, maybe a welcome into the family. But the moment I stepped closer to the stage, something strange caught my attention. My future father-in-law was standing beside her with a tablet in his hands, connected to the giant screen behind them. A screen that moments ago had been showing childhood photos of the bride. The room lights dimmed slightly. My mother-in-law cleared her throat and said the family believed honesty was the most important part of any marriage. Then she said something that made my chest tighten. Before someone becomes part of their family, they deserve to know exactly who that person is. A quiet ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. I looked toward my fiancée again. Her expression had changed now, concern replacing the earlier excitement. Then the screen behind them flickered to life. A photograph appeared. My photograph. Not one from the engagement. Not one from tonight. It was an old picture, one I had not seen in years. A picture from a time in my life I worked very hard to leave behind. Whispers began moving through the tables. My mother-in-law's voice filled the room again, calm and controlled, explaining that some people hide their past when marrying into respectable families. But tonight the truth deserved to be seen. More photos appeared on the screen. Old clothes, old places, old mistakes. The kind of images designed to make someone look small in a room full of strangers. I could feel every pair of eyes in the hall locked on me now. Exactly the humiliation she wanted. Exactly the moment she had planned. What none of them realized yet was something I had quietly prepared for weeks. Because a few days earlier I discovered something about my future in-laws. Something they were very desperate to keep hidden. And tonight, in front of every guest at this wedding, their plan to embarrass me was about to become the biggest mistake they ever made. The screen behind the stage kept changing. One photo after another appeared while the guests watched in uncomfortable silence. Images from years I rarely talked about anymore. Old apartments. Cheap uniforms from jobs I worked when money barely covered rent. A younger version of me standing outside places I was not proud of. My mother-in-law narrated the slideshow calmly, almost like she was presenting a family documentary. Except the target was me. She explained how some people climb their way into successful families without sharing where they truly came from. She mentioned mistakes, poor choices, unstable years. Every sentence carefully shaped to make the room question my place beside her daughter. I stood there feeling the weight of 200 curious faces. Some people whispered to each other. Others avoided looking at me directly. Across the room, I saw my fiancée step closer to the stage, her expression tightening with confusion and anger. She clearly had no idea her parents planned this. That alone told me everything. This was not about honesty. It was about control. Her parents had never liked the fact that I built my life from nothing. Their world was polished, wealthy, comfortable. Mine had been rough in the beginning. To them, that difference made me a risk. A man who did not belong in their perfect family picture. The slideshow stopped on one particular photo. The worst one. A picture taken outside a pawn shop late at night years ago, during a time when I was trying to survive after losing everything. My mother-in-law's voice lowered slightly while she pointed at the screen. She said her family believed people should know exactly who they invite into their lives. The message was obvious. Look at the man standing beside my daughter. Look at where he came from. The whispers grew louder now. But while the crowd focused on the screen, my attention shifted toward something else. The table near the stage. A small black laptop sat beside the projector system controlling the slideshow, connected to the display, exactly where I expected it to be. A week earlier, I learned about tonight's surprise when a cousin accidentally mentioned the slideshow during a rehearsal dinner conversation. At first, I thought it was a misunderstanding, until I heard the tone in her voice. Pity. That was when I started asking questions. And the answers led me somewhere interesting. Because during those quiet conversations, I discovered something my future in-laws never intended anyone to know. Something far more damaging than a few old photos from my past. I looked back at the giant screen again as another image appeared. The crowd continued watching the show they thought was exposing me. But hidden inside my jacket pocket was a small flash drive. And inside that drive was a collection of files that told a very different story about the family standing on that stage. The only question now was timing. Because once the next part began, the humiliation in this room was about to change direction. Very quickly, another photo appeared on the giant screen. This one showed an old car I used to drive years ago. Rust around the doors, one headlight dim, parked outside a rundown apartment building. The kind of place people in this room would never even notice while driving past. Soft laughter started spreading through a few of the tables. Not loud, but loud enough. My mother-in-law continued speaking with that same calm voice, explaining how difficult backgrounds sometimes follow people into new families. She said marriage required trust and transparency. The words sounded noble, but the intention behind them was clear. Make the guests question the groom. Make the bride's family look wise and protective. And most importantly, make me look like someone who had hidden something shameful. Across the stage, my fiancée finally grabbed the microphone stand and tried to interrupt. Her mother gently placed a hand on her arm and guided her back, smiling toward the audience like everything was perfectly normal. The control in that small gesture said everything. This moment had been planned carefully. The slideshow moved forward again. More images, more whispers, more quiet judgment moving across the room. But while the crowd focused on the screen, my eyes stayed on the small laptop near the projector table. The device controlling the entire presentation. Exactly where I needed it to be. 3 days earlier, I had visited the venue during setup hours, pretending to confirm seating arrangements. While the staff prepared decorations, I located the projection system and quietly tested the USB ports on the laptop. Simple, accessible, no password lock. That told me everything I needed to know. My future father-in-law stepped forward beside the screen now, adding his own voice to the presentation. He spoke about family reputation and protecting the future of their daughter. Guests nodded politely. Some looked uncomfortable. Others seemed entertained by the drama unfolding during what should have been a celebration. The screen froze again on another old image of me standing outside a small mechanic shop. The room felt heavy with judgment. My mother-in-law turned slightly toward the audience and asked a quiet question. If someone truly respected a family, should they not reveal their past before becoming part of it? The silence that followed felt sharp. Exactly the response she expected. But in that silence, my hand slowly slipped inside my jacket pocket. My fingers closed around the flash drive. Inside that drive were financial records, emails, and several photographs taken during a business trip my future father-in-law made 2 years earlier. Evidence that told a story far more interesting than anything currently showing on the screen. A story involving offshore accounts, hidden payments, and one very expensive secret relationship that his wife clearly knew nothing about. The crowd still believed they were watching my humiliation. But the moment I stepped closer to the projector table, the direction of tonight's story was about to change. Because once that flash drive touched the laptop, the next images on the screen would not belong to my past. They would belong to theirs. The room stayed focused on the giant screen, while another photo from my past filled the wall behind the stage. A younger version of me standing outside a small diner, wearing a stained apron from a late-night shift I once worked just to keep the lights on in my apartment. My mother-in-law spoke again, her voice calm and almost sympathetic now. She explained that everyone has struggles in life, but honesty matters when entering a respected family. The audience listened carefully. Some guests nodded. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. My fiancée stood frozen beside the stage, clearly torn between defending me and trying to understand why her parents had turned her wedding into this moment. That hesitation was exactly what her parents were counting on. Confusion creates silence. Silence allows humiliation to grow. But while the spotlight remained on me, I quietly stepped away from the center aisle and moved toward the side of the stage where the projector table stood. The small laptop controlling the presentation sat open, glowing beneath the dim lights. No one paid attention. Every eye in the room was still locked on the slideshow. My future father-in-law continued speaking about reputation and responsibility. His tone carried the confidence of someone who believed he had already won this moment. That confidence almost made me smile, because 3 nights earlier I had discovered something interesting while reviewing the files stored on that flash drive in my pocket. The secret emails alone were damaging, but the photos were worse. Much worse. Especially the ones taken in Miami during a supposed business conference that never actually existed. The laptop screen beside me displayed the slideshow software, cycling through the remaining images prepared by my future in-laws. I could see the final photo waiting in the queue. One last embarrassing image designed to finish their story. The perfect ending to their public humiliation. I slipped the flash drive into the USB port. The laptop recognized it instantly. A small window appeared asking which file to open. My heart stayed steady while I navigated the folders. Across the room, my mother-in-law's voice continued filling the hall. She spoke about protecting her daughter from people who might hide the truth about their character. The irony almost made me laugh, because at that exact moment, the files inside the flash drive were loading onto the system connected to the giant screen behind them. The slideshow paused briefly. Guests assumed it was part of the program. My future father-in-law glanced back at the laptop for only a second before returning his attention to the audience. He had no idea what was about to happen. The cursor moved across the screen in front of me. One click replaced their final image with something new, something they had never planned for tonight. I stepped back from the projector table just as the giant screen flickered. At first, the audience thought it was another picture from my past. But the image that appeared behind the stage was not a pawn shop, not an old apartment, not a diner. It was a photograph taken inside a luxury hotel room in Miami. And standing in that photo, very clearly, was my future father-in-law. But the woman beside him was definitely not his wife. For a brief second, the room stayed silent. Guests assumed the new image on the screen was simply another slide in the presentation. But the confusion started spreading quickly when people realized the photo had nothing to do with my past. The picture showed a luxury hotel room. Soft lighting, ocean view windows, expensive furniture, and standing near the balcony was my future father-in-law. His arm rested comfortably around a woman who clearly was not his wife. The whispers began almost instantly. Heads turned toward the stage. My mother-in-law stopped speaking mid-sentence as the image behind her caught her attention. The microphone lowered slowly from her mouth while she turned to look. The color drained from her face. Across the stage, my future father-in-law froze. For the first time that evening, his calm confidence disappeared completely. His eyes locked onto the giant screen like he was trying to convince himself the image was not real. But it was. And the guests were already studying every detail. Someone near the front table leaned toward another guest and pointed at the screen. The quiet murmur spreading across the room was growing louder by the second. The woman in the photograph looked young, elegant, dressed in a white summer dress that contrasted sharply with the expensive watch visible on the man standing beside her. My future father-in-law, the same man who had been lecturing the room about family reputation only seconds earlier. My mother-in-law stepped backward slowly, staring at the screen with a mixture of shock and disbelief. Her voice finally returned, but it sounded nothing like the controlled tone she used earlier. She demanded to know what that image meant. Before anyone answered, the screen changed again. Another photograph appeared, this one taken outside the same Miami hotel. The same two people walking together along the beach, his hand resting on her back. Their expressions relaxed, comfortable, familiar. The murmurs inside the wedding hall turned into full conversations now. Guests leaned toward each other, trying to understand what they were seeing. My fiancée looked from the screen to her father and then to her mother. Confusion quickly turned into anger as the truth behind the images became impossible to ignore. But the slideshow was not finished. The laptop continued playing the files from the flash drive. A third image appeared. This one was clearer than the others. A close photo taken at a restaurant patio. Wine glasses on the table, sunset behind them, and the two people sitting close together, smiling like they had nothing in the world to hide. My future father-in-law finally rushed toward the projector table. His calm composure from earlier was completely gone now. Panic moved through his voice as he demanded the screen be shut off immediately. But before he reached the laptop, the next file began loading automatically. This time it was not a photograph. It was a video. And the first few seconds of that recording were about to turn this wedding reception into something none of the guests would ever forget. The screen flickered once as the video began. At first, the guests thought it was just another photograph loading slowly. But then the image moved. The scene showed the same Miami hotel balcony from the earlier photos. The ocean stretched across the background while evening sunlight reflected off the glass railing. My future father-in-law stepped into the frame. A few seconds later, the same woman from the photographs joined him. The room fell completely silent. Unlike the still images, the video left no room for interpretation. Their body language said everything. Comfortable smiles, relaxed conversation, the kind of closeness that did not belong to two strangers attending a business meeting. Across the hall, someone gasped. My mother-in-law stood frozen near the stage, staring at the screen like she was watching a nightmare unfold in front of hundreds of witnesses. My future father-in-law finally reached the projector table and slammed his hand onto the laptop keyboard. The video paused for a moment, but the screen did not go black. Instead, another clip immediately began playing. Ryan, the venue technician, had already configured the system earlier to continue the playlist automatically once it started, something my future in-laws never bothered to check. The second video showed a different angle of the same hotel balcony. This time the camera captured clearer audio. My future father-in-law's voice drifted through the speakers. He laughed while talking about a business trip he had told his wife was a financial conference. Then he said something that caused the entire room to react at once. He joked about how easy it was to keep certain secrets when people trusted him too much. The silence in the wedding hall broke instantly. Guests began whispering louder. Some stood up from their chairs just to get a better look at the screen. My fiancée stepped closer to the stage now, her expression no longer confused. It was furious. She looked directly at her father, waiting for an explanation that clearly was not coming. My future father-in-law's face had turned pale. His earlier speech about honesty and family reputation now echoed in the air like a cruel joke. He tried again to close the laptop, pressing keys quickly while glancing at the audience watching him unravel. But the system kept playing the final file. This one was not taken in Miami. It was recorded in a quiet restaurant office during a private dinner meeting. My future father-in-law sat across from the same woman while discussing a series of financial transfers. Large numbers appeared on a printed document lying on the table between them. Money moved through accounts that did not belong to his company, accounts that were never mentioned in any official reports. The whispers inside the wedding hall turned into full shock, because the story unfolding on that screen was no longer just about an affair. It was about something far more serious. And the man who had tried to humiliate me in front of his entire family was now standing under the same spotlight he created. But the final part of the recording was about to make the entire situation explode. The final recording continued playing while the room remained frozen in shock. The camera inside the restaurant office showed my future father-in-law leaning across the table, speaking quietly to the woman sitting across from him. Papers were spread between them, filled with numbers and account details. Even without hearing every word clearly, the meaning behind the conversation was obvious. Money. Large amounts of it. Money moving through places it was never supposed to go. My future father-in-law pointed at one of the documents and laughed again, the same confident laugh he used earlier while lecturing the wedding guests about honesty and reputation. He mentioned how easy it was to move funds when no one looked too closely. The woman nodded while sliding another paper toward him. The camera zoomed slightly, revealing the header of the document. Offshore transfer authorization. A ripple of disbelief spread through the hall. The guests who had been whispering earlier were now openly staring at the screen and then back at the man standing beside the stage. My future father-in-law. The man who had tried to destroy my image only minutes earlier. His hands trembled slightly as he slammed the laptop shut. The giant screen went dark. But the damage had already been done. 200 witnesses had just seen enough to understand what the recordings meant. My mother-in-law slowly turned toward him. Her expression had completely changed. Earlier, she stood tall and confident while presenting my past like evidence in a courtroom. Now she looked like someone discovering a secret she had never imagined. The silence between them lasted only a few seconds. Then the question started. Her voice came out sharp and demanding, asking where those videos came from and why her husband was in them. He tried to speak, but the words struggled to form. For the first time that evening, The man who controlled every moment of the event looked completely lost. Across the stage, my fiancée watched the entire exchange without blinking. Her eyes moved from her father to her mother, and then toward me, standing near the projector table. The crowd's attention followed her gaze. Dozens of guests turned toward me at the same time. The same people who had been quietly judging me earlier. Now their expressions carried something very different. Understanding. My future father-in-law finally managed to force a few angry words through his panic. He demanded to know who was responsible for playing those recordings. The answer was obvious to everyone in the room. I stepped forward slowly. The spotlight that had been meant to embarrass me now followed my movement across the stage. And when I stopped near the microphone, the entire wedding hall fell silent again. Because the man who had just been exposed was staring directly at me. And he was about to realize that the humiliation he planned for me had only just begun. The silence inside the wedding hall felt heavier than anything earlier that night. 200 guests watched the stage without speaking. The giant screen behind us had gone dark after the laptop was shut, but the images were already burned into everyone's memory. My future father-in-law stood near the projector table, breathing hard, his earlier confidence completely gone. The same man who had calmly narrated my past only minutes earlier now struggled to even look at the crowd. My mother-in-law stepped away from him slowly. Her eyes moved between the guests, the blank screen, and finally her husband. The realization settling over her face was impossible to hide. This moment was no longer under her control. My fiancée stood a few steps behind them, watching everything unfold. Her anger had turned into something colder now. Disappointment mixed with disbelief. When I stepped closer to the microphone, the room became completely still again. Every person there expected me to speak. For a moment, I simply looked around the hall. The same people who had whispered about my old photos earlier were now staring at the stage with wide eyes. The mood of the room had shifted completely. Then I spoke calmly. I explained that the images they saw earlier from my past were real. I never denied the difficult years I had lived through. I worked jobs most people in that room would never take. I struggled, failed, and rebuilt my life from the ground up. But those years were never something I tried to hide. They were proof that people can change. My voice remained steady while I continued. What I never expected was that tonight someone would try to use those years as a weapon in front of hundreds of guests. A quiet murmur passed through the crowd. My future father-in-law finally tried to interrupt, but the moment he stepped forward, my mother-in-law raised her hand toward him. The gesture stopped him instantly. For the first time that evening, she wanted answers more than she wanted control. I finished my final sentence slowly. If tonight was supposed to reveal the truth about character, then it seems the truth found the right screen after all. The room remained silent for another long moment. Then something unexpected happened. Several guests near the front tables began clapping. At first it was only a few people. Then more joined. The applause spread across the hall, growing louder as the tension that had filled the room finally broke. The same crowd that had been prepared to watch my humiliation was now witnessing something completely different. My future father-in-law lowered his head, unable to meet the eyes around him. The plan he designed to embarrass me had collapsed in front of everyone. And in the end, the stage he built for my humiliation became the place where his own secrets were revealed. I stepped away from the microphone while the applause continued. Because the last laugh that night did not require another word. Tell me in the comment section that where are you watching this story from. Also subscribe to this channel if you like the story. See you in the next one.